They say that when a new pope rises, heaven watches silently. But sometimes, silence is a warning. There is an ancient prophecy, one that speaks of a final pope, a man who won't just lead the church, but carry the spiritual fate of millions on his shoulders. And now, with the election of Pope Leo XIV, a question echoes in the hearts of believers. Is he the one Saint Malachy saw centuries ago? The one chosen not just by the cardinals, but by something far older, deeper, and silently active in the shadows? Most people don't realize it yet, but certain signs have already begun to appear. Not through official proclamations, but in the subtleties. In his measured words, in the silences between them, in the places he came from, and the gestures he avoids. If you're someone who feels spiritually in tune, you need to stay with us until the very end of this video. Some clues only make sense when seen from the beginning. Others are hidden between the lines. Now is the perfect time to subscribe to the channel, because what we're about to uncover won't be on the news. It's in the patterns, the symbols, and the moments when Pope Leo says nothing. Exactly when the world expects him to speak. This video is different. We won't feed you a ready-made theory. We're going to walk through facts, and let you connect the dots. And with each chapter, a new detail will surface. A subtle piece of the puzzle that seems harmless at first, but, when placed together, reveals something much greater. So stay alert. Watch the names, the dates, the locations, and above all, listen to what is not being said. Because maybe Pope Leo XIV wasn't chosen to lead the church as we know it. Maybe he's here to prepare it for what's coming next. Before he became Pope Leo XIV, he was known as Cardinal Jean-Louis Taurin II, a man who never seemed to chase power, yet always found himself near it. He didn't emerge from the spotlight like many of his predecessors. In fact, his rise was so quiet that when his name appeared during the early stages of the 2025 conclave, many asked, "Who?" But those who had followed him closely knew that his silence wasn't ignorance. It was design. Born in Lyon, France, Leo XIV's early life was marked by a deep devotion to theology, but not in the academic sense. He was known to spend hours meditating in silence as a boy, even skipping group activities to stay in the chapel. He later studied in Jerusalem, and then spent several years in Ethiopia and Lebanon, learning languages most cardinals don't even consider. Some say he became fluent in Aramaic, the language many believe Jesus himself spoke. But what truly stood out was his time in Aleppo, Syria, during the height of the regional conflict. While others left for safer posts, he stayed, quietly assisting Christian minorities, helping refugees, and often risking his life without ever writing about it. That's the pattern. He moves silently. He serves in the margins. And yet, when crises deepen, he always seems to be at the center. Even his elevation to cardinal was unusual. He was appointed during a private session, without the traditional fanfare, no interviews, no headlines. Just a quiet acceptance, and then, back to work. What does this tell us? It tells us that Leo XIV is not a man of the stage. He's a man of patterns, of watching, of preparation. And maybe, just maybe, that's why he was chosen. Not because he sought the position, but because the church needed someone no one saw coming. In the next chapter, we'll explore how his words, or lack of them, have already signaled spiritual shifts that most believers are not yet prepared to see. Pope Leo XIV doesn't speak often. And when he does, he rarely uses dramatic language. But those who pay attention have begun to notice something deeper. Unlike his predecessors, Leo XIV tends to avoid phrases like Holy Mother Church, tradition, or even doctrine in his homilies. Instead, he speaks of awakening, discernment, and something he repeatedly calls the hour of preparation. In his first public address, he said, "We must learn to listen to the voice of God again, not in thunder, but in the trembling silence of our own hearts." At first, this might seem poetic. But to those familiar with the writings of mystics like Padre Pio, John of the Cross, or Catherine of Siena, this phrase echoes something deeper, something that speaks not just of inner reflection, but of divine warning. And then, there are the pauses. Several of his speeches contain long silences, awkwardly long by public speaking standards. Some believe he uses these moments to allow reflection. Others think they're calculated, that the silences are messages in themselves. In a Vatican event meant to address the modernization of the Church, he stood at the pulpit, opened his notes, then closed them again without speaking a word for over a minute. The room was silent. Then he said, "Sometimes, the Church must fast from words, to remember the weight of its voice." The press called it abstract. Others called it vague. But spiritual observers across Europe noted a shift, a return to a more apocalyptic tone, especially among contemplative communities. Monasteries reported a rise in inquiries about old texts on the end times. Online forums for Catholic scholars lit up with theories. Is Pope Leo XIV trying to warn the Church quietly? Or is he subtly fulfilling what some believe to be his role in a prophetic unfolding? What's clear is this: his silences speak, and those who ignore them may be missing something not just political, but deeply spiritual. In the next chapter, we'll connect this pattern of silence to an ancient prediction, the prophecy of Saint Malachy, and how Leo XIV may be its final name. In the 12th century, Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop, wrote a list of 112 short phrases, each describing a future pope. According to believers, Pope Leo XIV would be the final name before the Church faces its greatest trial. The final entry reads, "In persecution extrema sre sedebit." In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit. Unlike the previous mottos, it doesn't end with a name. It fades, unfinished, almost as if the last pontiff isn't meant to complete the list, but to close the era. Many had believed Pope Francis fit this description. But with the unexpected election of Leo XIV, the focus shifted. His name wasn't predicted. His rise was quiet. His style, radically contemplative. And most importantly, he fits the archetype of a transitional leader, not here to expand, but to prepare. Some theorists point to the blood moon during his conclave. Others, to the increasing instability within the Church and society. What if the prophecy is not about doom, but about a spiritual reset? What if Leo XIV's mission is not to save the Church as it is, but to cleanse it, to purify it through silence, discernment, and truth? He may not bring destruction, but he might be the one who opens the final gate for something else to begin. In the next chapter, we'll explore what this means for those who are spiritually aware, and what signs to look for as this new papacy unfolds. In the 12th century, Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop, experienced a vision during a pilgrimage to Rome. According to legend, he saw a line of 112 popes, each represented not by a name, but by a mysterious motto. These phrases were brief, symbolic, and eerily accurate when matched to real pontificates over the centuries. The final entry in the list was the most cryptic. It didn't give a motto. It gave a name. Peter the Roman, a pope who, according to the prophecy, would shepherd the Church through persecution, fire, and the destruction of Rome. For years, scholars and believers debated whether Pope Francis was the 112th pope, or if the prophecy left room for one final, unexpected successor. Now, Pope Leo XIV stands in that space. And while his name isn't Peter, something about his path matches the spirit of the prophecy. Let's examine the clues. 1. Leo XIV was born in Lyon, historically called Lugdunum, one of the major Roman outposts in ancient Gaul, a Roman city. 2. His theological training emphasized martyrdom, purification, and the fall of human structures, themes central to Malachy's final vision. 3. And perhaps most strikingly, his papal name, Leo, invokes not just past popes, but the symbol of the lion, a figure often linked to judgment, apocalypse, and divine authority in Scripture. Could the name Peter the Roman have been metaphorical? Could Leo, the Lion of Judgment, be the prophetic form of Peter, the Rock? And if Leo XIV is the final shepherd of the prophecy, what exactly is he leading the Church into? These are not questions meant to frighten. They're meant to awaken. Because prophecy doesn't exist to predict. It exists to prepare. In the next chapter, we'll explore what this new papacy could truly mean, not for doctrine or dogma, but for the spiritual energy of the world. If the prophecy holds weight, then we must ask, what should the faithful be watching for now? Not every papacy shifts the spiritual frequency of the world, but some act as thresholds. And many believe Pope Leo XIV may be one of them. Unlike his predecessors, Leo XIV hasn't focused on social commentary or geopolitical diplomacy. Instead, he's quietly redirected attention to inner silence, purification, and something he called in his Easter address, the confrontation of the soul with its own falseness. Those who walk a spiritual path know. Language like this isn't political. It's alchemical. It speaks of transformation, not governance. And that's where things become prophetic. Because according to many spiritual teachers, from the Desert Fathers to modern mystics, when a spiritual institution begins to speak inwardly instead of outwardly, it means a cycle is ending, and something deeper is beginning. This may be the true role of Leo XIV. Not to change doctrine, not to redefine faith, but to call the awakened into readiness. Watch how he speaks. He often refers to the church as a body in transition. He avoids terms like eternal security or unchanging truth, and instead speaks of the flame, the passage, the narrow door. In esoteric traditions, these are signs of initiation. So what should the awakened be watching for? Unspoken shifts in liturgy, pauses where there used to be declarations. Changes in tone during major Catholic feasts, especially those tied to resurrection, sacrifice, and the Holy Spirit. Sudden closures or rededications of ancient churches or monasteries, signs that the old structures are being sealed. But above all, watch for what is not explained. Because the awakened know that true spiritual leaders don't always teach directly. Sometimes, they move like symbols, living prophecies, whose gestures carry more weight than any sermon. And in Leo XIV, we may be seeing just that. A pope who came not to rule from the throne, but to stand at the edge of something sacred and wait. In the next chapter, we'll explore what may come next, not from him, but through him. As the church enters a new phase many feel, but few understand. No pope lives forever. But some leave behind more than memory. They leave signs. And the question echoing amongst spiritual thinkers, mystics, and even quiet theologians is this: what will Pope Leo XIV leave behind? Not in politics, not in church law, but in energy, in the spiritual climate of the world. Many believe his role may not be to complete a cycle, but to ignite one. To spark a flame that will either purify the faithful, or expose the shadow that still lingers inside the church. Some predict that his papacy will mark the beginning of a mass return to mystical prayer, especially among the youth. A global spiritual disillusionment, followed by a search for authenticity beyond dogma. A rise in interior miracles, conversions, healings, visions, not as public spectacles, but as private awakenings. But others, more cautious, believe his reign could also precede a schism, subtle but real, between those who cling to institutional structure and those who follow the Spirit. A revelation, perhaps of ancient texts or prophecies hidden beneath the Vatican for centuries. Or even a moment when the Pope steps aside, not by force, but by choice, to allow something new to emerge. And this is why the spiritually awake must stay vigilant. Not afraid. Vigilant. Because if Pope Leo XIV is who some believe he is, the final voice before the storm or the firestarter of renewal, then everything from now on must be viewed symbolically. His trips, his silences, his unexpected decisions. Each may carry weight far beyond the surface. In the ancient language of sacred prophecy, flames do not only destroy, they reveal. They burn away illusion. They expose the true shape of things. So perhaps Leo XIV won't be remembered for words or policies, but for the fire he left behind. A fire that calls the faithful inward, and prepares the world for something greater than the church itself. Not all storms come with thunder. Some arrive through quiet footsteps, through a whisper at the edge of a sermon, through a pope who says less than he sees. Pope Leo XIV may never declare himself a prophet. He may never unveil ancient scrolls or rewrite the laws of the church. But that might not be his mission. Because sometimes, the role of a shepherd is not to lead the flock in full daylight, but to guide them gently through the dark. And if what has been whispered by mystics, written by saints, and hidden in old prophecies is true, then perhaps Leo XIV is not the end, but the signal, the torchbearer before the veil lifts. And for those who walk a spiritual path, this is not a time to fear. This is a time to discern, to observe, to pray not louder, but deeper. Because if we are indeed entering a new age of purification, we must remember, the church is not made of stone and gold. It is made of hearts. And every shift in the heavens begins first within us. If this video stirred something in you, a thought, a fear, or even a strange sense of peace, then share it. Comment below what you feel is happening. And don't forget to subscribe, because we'll continue watching the signs the world ignores. Because in the silence of a single pope, the next chapter of spiritual history may already be unfolding.